This is the Environmental Protection Commission regular meeting and public hearing for Wednesday, May 1st, 2019. First piece is Old Business EPC 3, 2019. Town of Darien Parks and Rec Commission, Weed Beach Park and Short Lane. Proposed wetland filling and compensatory wetland creation and enhancement. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 56 as lots number 3 and 10. Now, do we have that?
That was the one I emailed, and you have hard copies.
Okay, yep, I got that here. Okay, are there any additions and things like that? Any come? No?
No,
Susan, you okay?
okay, thank you.
It may surprise you, Mr. Chairman, but I couldn't find anything that
Disappointed.
edited.
I'm disappointed. Okay, may I have a motion to approve this?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Susan. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you. The next one is EPC 11, 2019. Donald and Kathy Allman, 55 Arrowhead Way, proposing a replacement house and related site disturbance in an upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 69 as lot number 18. That we've got also any proposed changes, edits, comments?
I have a very simple edit on page 2, and I'll just pass it to Rich.
Great. Susan, anything?
Nope.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve as amended? Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Susan. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Okay, the next piece of business is EPC 14, 2019, Deborah Ritchie, 16 Stony Brook Road South, proposing wetland enhancements and pool construction in an upland review area. This site is shown on Assessor's Map number 19 as lot number 20.
You have the engineering drawing and Doug DeVesta's letter, and Doug is here. If you want to, he can explain.
Sure.
You had heard from Louis Fusco last time.
That's right. No.
Good evening, Doug DeVesta, professional engineer representing the applicant. We've prepared a site drainage plan. Louis last week went over what we're proposing to do out there with the pool and terraces. And we had comments from Darren regarding our drainage system. We are in the flood zone of Stony Brook, and so we did ask for a waiver from Section 880 of the planning and zoning regulations, meaning we don't need to do a full drainage study. The reason why we're asking for that is because majority of the property is wetlands, and what's not wetlands, the soils are poor. As Darren mentioned in his comments there, we did do a test hole on the south side and the north side. We got a little bit of percolation rate, soils were really high there, so if you felt just doing a water quality volume versus a full drainage study out there was appropriate for this site there. We'll have a small amount of increase in impervious surfaces. Regulations stated there's 1,000 square feet of impervious surfaces or more requires a full drainage study. That's what we're asking for reduction. But really, if you look at the existing patio in the center of the house here is existing. We're utilizing the pool as its own detention system. Therefore, you have a net increase of like a couple hundred square feet or like 300, 400 square feet of impervious surfaces. Therefore, we're asking for a waiver of the regulations for that and handling the water quality volume, taking the runoff from about half of the patio down to a small area for just some infiltration and some into the ground, and also one to the north there, just again, handle the first inch of runoff of the water quality volume. That's really, and then Louis went over the details of what we're proposing to do out there, and he's here tonight if there's any more questions regarding the landscaping of the project.
Okay. Any
I
questions?
wasn't here last time, so.
Okay. Susan?
Any questions on that?
So you're basically using the freeboard as a detention
Correct.
on the pool.
Correct. I mean, it's about 4 inches, 4 to 5 inches, so most storms are less than an inch, but we do get some of those, those big downpours that handle 3 or 4 inches. But I felt that, this is, if it does overflow, we utilize one of the edges as a spillway and go over like that. But again, the majority of the property is wetlands, so there's really not much area to do anything other than what we've got proposing. And the property is on sewer and water, and we also have a sewer easement that runs along the south side and along the north side, or the east side of the property. So again, we're very limited as to what we can do out there.
Doug, could you help me understand again why you feel a waiver of a regulation that you cited, 880 maybe?
888. They do.
Is necessary, just to help me.
It's again, majority of the reason why I'm asking for this waiver is the soils are so poor out there. And it was probably all filled wetlands back, and the house was built back in the 50s. And the soils we've got there are just marginal enough that we can get something out there, but nothing large enough to get a full drainage system out there to handle all that runoff. We've got wetlands, as you can see, my green line here is the wetlands. We've got very little area to do anything. We've got sewer, we've got water coming in the front of the property. Plus, we also have the easement along the south side of the property, which is all in the wetlands, along the wetlands in the back there. So again, we're very limited in space, and that's why we're asking for this waiver.
So it's going to push water down faster.
Yeah, it's just, again, there's certain places in the town really warrant something like this, and this is one of the lots I think warrants just the water quality. Again, we're going to get some reduction in runoff, but we're also taking and looking at the quality of the water versus just the quantity of the water.
Yeah. All right. I don't have any more questions.
Just one more question. Your colored map is helping me understand my black and white version a little better. So your decking that surrounds the pool is smack up against the edge of the wetlands, I think. Am I correct?
Correct. That's all been disturbed, because if you look out a little further, you'll see a little bit lighter area with like little dots on there. That's the actual edge of the lawn. So it really it's already a disturbed area. And I believe Lewis is preparing a very detailed landscaping in that area, takes that lawn area out and creating additional wetlands. Lewis will come up here and explain that a little more for
I
you.
think we went over at last meeting, we're transferring 7,000 square feet of lawn area.
I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself for the record and stay by the microphone? Thank you so much.
Hi, Louis Fusco, landscape architect, representing the client here.
Thank you.
As we had gone over last month, for those who weren't here, essentially, 1 second. The wetland, hold it here. The existing wetland area is currently almost extensively lawn right to the back of the property. So we're transferring, the majority of that is going to be turned into wetland plantings, trees, perennials, shrubs, herbaceous material. That will help also with the soil type and the runoff. Right now the water's basically sheets. It's a soggy lawn area that is going to be transferred and benefit that area. The existing, as Doug mentioned, the existing patios are in this area. The new pool, the patio does extend. There is a few extra, couple of 200 or 300 extra square feet of patio space that is added in that area. It all stays out of the wetland buffer, as well as out of the wetlands, as well as the floodplain. But it is, as is the house,
What's the patio?
in the excuse me.
What's the patio made of?
The patio is a blue stone patio.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. So, we've tried to keep everything as tight to the house as possible, and as you know, the house itself is within the buffer and in the controlled area. So I think that making a change to the system in the plantings will really help. Right now, the roadway runoff also comes down the street and comes along the side of the house, which is all just basically roots and dirt and lawn, which I think planting that area is going to, and we're, really slow down the water and give it a chance to infiltrate as best it can coming around the house. So I think the project in the end will be an improvement of the water quality as well as the site itself.
Okay.
No further questions.
No further questions? Okay. Thank you. Next one is new business, EPC 18,
Can
2000.
I just ask, would you want to?
You write it up?
Me to write it up?
Yep.
Or-
Yep. EPC 18, 2019, Henry Farnham,
I think you
31
said-
Buttonwood Road, proposing fence construction in a regulated area and upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 5 as lot number 6.
He had asked that if you could take him at the end of new business.
Okay, done, okay. Then we move to EPC 19, 2019, Paolo Sordoni, 21 Tower Drive, proposing to modify a conservation easement and restore wetlands to allow for a deck and house expansion in a regulated area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 1 as lot number 125.
Good evening. My name is Tom Ryder, biologist with Land Tech in Westport, representing Mr. and Mrs. Sardoni. Their property is at 21 Tower Drive, as just mentioned. It is a 1.12 acre property. The property contains a single-family residence in the southwest portion of the property. The property here is outlined here. The developed portion of the lot is right here, with the house being where I just circled. The property contains a single-family residence, as I said, and the remainder of the property consists of a wooded area and wetland protected by a conservation easement. Conservation easement is here, 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 and around. The conservation easement was established in 1999 and then filed in 2000, so it was around that time frame when the property was developed by a previous owner. There's a stone wall right here and here that delineates the developed portion of the property with the conservation easement. The easement covers about 0.88 acres, and the developed portion is 0.24 acres. There is a wooden deck in there, constructed by the previous owners as well, off the back of the house. As I just pointed out, the conservation area is right up against the house, both in the back and to the side yard. So the proposal is to revise the conservation area easement to allow for a usable backyard and to allow for a existing deck and a play structure. The area is currently being used, the current owner and the previous owner, as a rear yard. There's pictures here kind of showing it. It's kind of a moss and grassed area in here. The high functioning wetlands are over in this area over here, and there is a channel, small ditch here, and a brook running down through that area. The proposed revision, what we're asking for on the site plans and in the application that was submitted to you, is to move back the conservation easement to this area, which is about 45 feet from the back of the house. Again, that would provide the current owners with some little backyard area. The easement would still have about 69%, or 69.1% of the property would still be under the easement. The owner actually loves and respects the wetlands, so we were kind of impressed on how much she's done on her own. She has removed, well, they have, but I think it's mostly Mrs. Sardoni that's done most of the work, have removed a lot of the invasive species from the area and done a lot of the plantings. They've also installed bat and bird boxes because they're kind of embracing this whole area, but they would like, again, some room to have a small recreation area in their backyard. So the So they will be restoring, there's some areas over here to the east that have been encroached on by the neighbors. You can see there's some lawn here. And they will be converting that back to wetland, native plantings as well, kind of restoring back that to the wetland functions as it originally was. The proposed modification that we're offering would not change the current use of the yard. It has been used as that, will continue to be used as that, would not require any wetland disturbance or filling, and no disturbance to the vegetation. Again, the only disturbance to the vegetation on the property that is proposed is, again, they'll be removing some additional invasive species and putting in some native herbaceous and shrubs. So the compensation for this type of use, even though they'll change, the land use really hasn't changed any, but the compensation is to restore these areas and to continue to improve the wetlands that they have been doing for so long. Having said all of that, I've had some conversations with staff yesterday and today, and I've learned that they have had discussions and that they actually offered a different alternative to our proposal. We're not proposing that at this time. This is for acceptance. I know that the meeting is going to be sometime in June. So during that time, we can work out the details of that. And then when we come back in June, we'd be able to provide a plan that maybe incorporates some of that or all of that plan with some of our plan. We'll have kind of worked out the details to take the benefits of both. So again, a final proposal will be presented during that hearing in June. So all we're requesting really now is that the application be allowed to be heard in June under the public hearing process, so that a full presentation and discussion of the ideas can be presented.
Okay. This is a conservation easement that was subject to litigation in the 90s. And so this was, I believe the Sardonis bought it after it was built. And so, it's sort of like my house is near I-95, me complaining about I-95, okay, and asking to, this was a given when they purchased the house, which was a market arm's length transaction. My recommendation as chairman, and it'll be confirmed by the commission here, I hope, is to say, we'll listen, okay? But I still don't understand why the commission should give up conservation square feet because someone wants a backyard or a new kitchen, push out the kitchen. Okay, I'm concerned on precedent. I'm concerned on a lot of categories here because the town has certain restrictions on that property that we as a commission can waive should we choose to. We don't. It's a very, 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 very unusual event that we would choose to. Okay, and typically when we choose to move to say, hey, normally I would say, okay, I could see, I'll give you, whatever how many square feet did you want there?
Well, this is 45, it was a distance of 45 feet, but I don't have the
Okay,
square footage.
but I would trade it and say, okay, I'll give you that, but you got to give me, a 2-for-1, okay, or something like that somewhere. That would say somewhere else. In this piece of property, it already is virtually all conservation. So it's very difficult for you to offer me a trade, okay, that says that a trade that I can go back and go, because right now, I don't deny this. I can accept it, but I don't even have to give a reason why I deny this. So work with staff. Rich and Jeremy are great to work with, and if jointly you come up with a proposal, I'll listen. Okay, but I would think I speak for my fellow members to say we have to be convinced.
Well, that's all we're
Okay, we
asking.
have to be convinced as to why it's in the town's interest that this happens.
That's all we're asking, is to allow it to go to public hearing to have.
Jeremy and I have had discussions with with
Okay,
Tom,
well, I
and
just wanna make it
think
very
we-
clear
I think we have some.
to Tom that,
Yep.
hey, you know, you're rowing upstream, okay? And that, you know, let's see what happens. Okay, let's see what happens, and we'll kick this, what's June 3rd?
June 3rd.
Yeah, June
5th,
June 3rd. My fellow commissioners, is that sort of reflection
Yep.
on it? So, okay, so we need a vote to kick it to public hearing?
Yep.
Okay, may I have a motion to push it? Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Susan. All in favor? Okay, so we'll see you June 3rd.
Great, thank you for your time.
Sure. The 3rd or the 5th, I'm sorry, I just
Fifth.
checked. The 5th, I think.
The 5th?
I just got to double check.
5th, sorry.
Yeah,
All right.
that's right.
The 5th.
No, it's not a hearing, right? No, we'll wait until the 5th.
Okay, EPC 21, 2019. Vikram Bhaskar, 114 Colony Road, proposing a wetland restoration and a sport court in an upland review area. This site is shown on Assessor's Map number 23 as lot number 125. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Danzer. I'm a soil scientist, professional wetland scientist.
Could you spell your last name for me, please?
Danzer.
Thank you very
Stephen
much.
Danzer.
Thank you.
I'm actually introducing this on behalf of Tracy Shalafo, landscape architect, who did 98% of the site plan design. Unfortunately, she had a commitment tonight. She could not be here. However, I was involved initially with this project because I did delineate the wetlands, so I'm also very familiar with the site, so I offered to help her out by being here. I know there's been some discussion between her and Mr. Jacobson. I don't know if you'd like to...
Yeah, we did walk the site, and I think the plan that Tracy has come up with will actually, if you combine that with the restoration going on at Valley Forge, between the two. Webster Valley, I'm sorry, Webster Valley.
Valley Forge,
I
right?
got it on my, Webster Valley, it'll actually create one kind of unified, much more valuable wetland than what was originally there. The original wetland was pretty much all Japanese knotweed and multiflora rose, I think, and other invasives. And so I think this will actually be an improvement. And they're asking for the sport court, as actually is what's already there. The sport
It
court is
exists.
already-
There is a sport court.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's why they're here for the sport court, for a permit for, and also doing some wetland enhancement and restoration, which has not been done.
So what are they requesting exactly on the sport court, since it's already there?
To maintain that, keep it there. It's basically on grade, it's pervious, it's in the lawn area, so I didn't see much of an issue with keeping the sport court.
Particularly since it's going to be next to Webster Valley Road, right?
What's
Or
going on
clean,
Webster
because
Valley
one
Road?
neighbor can't fix it, and then the next neighbor, give up on
Right.
it, so, okay. Gunnar?
I just have a question. If you're standing in the street facing the house, and to the far, I guess, right, looks like there's something right off the end of the house. Probably further up, right there. There's like, it looks like I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, it's labeled sand, so I assume it's a sandbox.
I don't think that's what it is. I walked by there, and I looked at it. There's nothing depicted on these drawings, but there is something there, and I just wondered what that was.
Yeah. I don't recollect this.
I'm sorry, I can't pick you up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. By nature, I spend my time in the wetlands area, so I'm more familiar down here than up in here.
It looked like there was another little court of some sort right there.
Well, I don't think there's anything pervious that I would have.
Impervious.
I didn't
Or-
walk
or
over and look
impervious,
at it. I was
sorry.
just curious what that was.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
No, I think it'd be a nice continuation of the
project next door.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there some coordination going on between the two parties?
I,
Those at 10 Webster Valley
Yeah.
and this?
well,
On paper, this looks like it would be an extension of what 10 Webster Valley
right,
was.
right. I've
proposing to
I've given
do.
them, I've put them in contact with each other. It's possible they can use some of the material from Colony and get access through there. If they can get permission to get access, it would be a lot easier. And then they might
Right.
be able to take some of that material and use it on their site. If they can't, then, you know, they'll have to come in the other way. But I think there's a good chance they could get access from working, I mean, the builder. I mean, they're gonna be under construction for quite a while. And I just don't think they would object to allowing them to use that area. It would be much easier for them.
I should think so, I
So,
agree.
I mean, I'll talk to also, reach out to the builder if necessary. And I've already spoken to them, and they didn't seem to have an issue with, you know, being able to coordinate.
Yeah, it would seem logical to coordinate that, yeah.
They'll have the equipment, they'll have, they'll the need for
Easier
material.
access.
Easier access, yeah.
And you looked at the planting plan, Rich?
Yeah, I think it's a very thorough plan.
Good. Okay, I don't have any particular, I think it's a good thing, actually, to happen, so. Anybody else? You all set? Okay.
So, and I don't think this matters at all, so let's keep it quick, but your agenda talks to proposing wetland restoration and a sport court, but the sport court's there. So it's really a wetland restoration. what we're
Well,
talking
they
about.
need a permit to
Preserve it.
to keep
They put it in the sports court without a permit, so.
So I use the
In
word,
theory,
So we want to make an existing illegal sport court a legal sport court.
yes,
Yes.
correct.
Thought I'd throw that in.
all right, well, you make it clear. All right, Rich, you can write that up then.
Thank you.
Yep, okay. I guess then we go back to EPC 18, Rich, to,
Mr. Farnham, I don't know if he's here. Oh, he's here, good.
okay. Here we go. It's EPC 18, 2019, Henry Farnham, 31 Buttonwood Road, proposing fence construction in a regulated area and upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map. Number 5 is lot number 6. Mr. Farnham?
The area, there's a small area of the fence that is next to the road that it may not be wetland soil, but it's delineated wetland soil, it's close, it's right against the right-of-way. But
It's on the map, for
It's
sure.
on the map, yeah, yeah.
It's very wet, it's very wet.
Pretty wet, yeah, so that section I could not do as an agent.
Mhm.
But the rest of it along the right-of-way, the split rail, I don't see it having any impact.
Can you put, one question I have was, can you put a fence in there in the wetlands, that soil is very wet.
Yeah, you can put a fence in there, it may need pressure treated wood or.
Yeah, we had 3 estimates, and all
That would
three of
be up to
them,
the fence
all
company.
3 fence companies said they could put a fence in
Could
that
you
area.
introduce yourself for
Oh,
the record?
I'm
please?
sorry, Henry Farnham at 31 Buttonwood Lane.
Thank you.
So you're going to do this type of fence?
Yes, that's our up the street, 67.
Yep.
I mentioned, I think, about 5 people on our street have similar type fences. None of them are on wetlands also. Our neighbor has a stone wall partially on wetlands. 7 Buttonwood also stone wall up on wetlands.
Yeah, are you going to, so you're not going to put it over the stream?
No, absolutely not.
So there's going to be a break in the fence?
Yes, if you look at my diagram, I'm going to do what's very similar to 41 Buttonwood did, have about 5 feet different,
Yep.
and then have it lined with the stone wall.
Yep, okay. I was just curious as to, just to make sure that you.
No, I
Yeah,
want
because
to
that would
have,
catch debris, I mean, you know.
I want not to catch debris and also have privacy for our neighbors to have that screening.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, Rich, I don't, for me, this is fine.
Yeah, as long as it's not
Agreed.
through the stream.
Yeah. Go ahead, you all set?
I'll write it up.
Yeah, write it up.
Well, thank you.
Okay, now we go to public hearings. EPC 5, 2019, Darien Athletic Foundation and Darien Parks and Recreation Commission, Nutmeg Lane, also known as the Diller property, proposing construction of a gravel running track and plank boardwalk in the wetlands and upland review area, and the construction of parking spaces in an upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 9 as lot number 128A. This has been continued from April, from the April meeting. So, by the way, I'd like just to make a comment here for the people. We kept this specifically open because the course had changed. The course had changed a little, and the neighbors requested time to take a look at the course changes. So, Joe, thank you for putting up the map there too. But, you know, I would like to say, hey, this is the third public commission. I just want to avoid repetition in comments.
Okay.
So the map, okay, that's the one we saw last time,
That is correct.
and that hasn't changed.
That map has not changed. Again, for the record, Joe Canis, licensed professional engineer with Ty and Bond, principal engineer there. And I have no presentation tonight because there are no changes since our last year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open up, any commission member have any comments? No? No? Okay, let's open up to the public. Ms. Cameron.
Hi, Susan Cameron, 42 Hoyt Street. I'm a former EPC commissioner and also former planning and zoning commissioner. And I did write you a letter, part of which I'm going to retract. I started watching this property in 2003 when I was on EPC and the proposal was for 2 tennis courts. And I amassed a great, one of the few files I kept because it's such a history of this piece of property, going back to the minutes of the meetings when they bought it. Ann Mandel was first selectman at the time. There have been a lot of proposals for this property, some of them really ambitious. This is a really, really good proposal. I was very pleased to be invited on the site walk, which the commission members, some of the commission members were on, and to see the property. I watched your last meeting. I wanted to get it up from my computer a couple times to come and make some corrections, but I was doing tax returns. I also watched the property on Easter weekend. After listening to the testimony of neighbors, I visited the property. I knew there was going to be rain. I was one of those people that watched over the high school site with Joe Canis. We did it together when they were building the new high school, so I'm super familiar with this whole area. And so I went out before Easter when it was dry, and I went out after Easter when it had rained. And I also want to own up to the fact that I was the one who suggested the culverts. When we did our site walk, there are now 2 intermittent streams. There was the original intermittent stream. I don't think that erosion is really going to be an issue having walked after Easter weekend. There's just not enough pitch to the grade to cause erosion, but you definitely are going to impound the water behind your running trail. So it would be good to allow it to flow through the way it wants to. I know there was a question, I don't know if Mr. Adelet is here this evening. I think he asked it. There was a question, what happens if you don't maintain them? Well, if you don't maintain them, you're going to go back to the original drawing, which didn't have them, and the water will just sit. But these should be very easy to keep clear. The stream runs north. There was one person here who seemed to think that the stream goes around his property on Nutmeg and comes back down south. The stream runs north. It goes north all the way around the high school. It picks up all the water from Weber and goes out under High School Lane. And it is wetter. It is absolutely wetter, and that's because people are building bigger and bigger houses and pumping their water out. And when they come to you on EPC and when they came to us on planning and zoning, they talk about peak flow. They're going to manage 100% of the peak flow. That's not the same as volume. You need to start asking them, and Joe will agree, you need to start asking, and Doug, you need to start asking them, are you handling 100% of the volume? Because in this case, the recipient of the water is a vacant piece of land, but in other applications, it's going to be someone's backyard. And I never felt as a commissioner that our decisions should result in civil litigation between property owners because now somebody's getting a lot more water. What else? So I'm retracting part of my letter because I walked with Nina Miller, a past EPC alum, and she was reminding me that when they were talking about Ox Ridge and buying the field, there is a group that would really like to have a walking trail that's well graded for people with disabilities. Well, this is perfect. This is going to be perfect for that because the reason you have to do the culverts and can't put in a little decking area is because the kids can't have to walk up onto, when they're running, go onto a decking area. They have to just be on grade. So this is all going to be at grade. So this will be perfect for that. So definitely, I think, put the parking in. I think that's minimal, and in terms of wetlands impacts. And I do think that people drive too fast, but that's when they come before the police commission to do the parking. They can ask for another bump, because you do need to have to request bumps. They're hard to get, actually. So they might want to request another bump, because people do drive too fast.
Excuse me, well, if they drive too fast and you need bumps,
It's Fairfield County.
Call the cops.
Don't get me started on how the ITE guys really need to do a separate overlay zone for Fairfield County, because we just don't meet their
If there are
mandates.
people who are speeding, I don't know.
They are.
I know there's a
but we
lot of
know.
traffic at 7:30 and at school closing, but,
And at
you live near a
games,
school.
and out
You live
weekends.
near a school, and so
Well, that's more of a
part of the
safety.
price.
Well, that's a safety thing. Okay, going on. So I do have, if anyone wants to keep this file, Jeremy's had it for a while and I got it back. There are a lot of things proposed for this piece of property over the years. It was always meant to have something on it. The reason the tennis courts didn't work out is because the coaches didn't want kids off in the woods somewhere playing tennis. They couldn't manage them, so that ended really the tennis courts. The one thing I know that the selectmen didn't plan on and didn't want and didn't buy this property for is so that the abutting neighbors who are too lazy or cheap to haul away their yard debris had a convenient place to put it. And while I am specifically talking here about Holly Lane and Nutmeg Lane, this is a practice that's ongoing throughout town. It's ongoing on park properties, on Board of Ed properties. I was on the Land Trust. It happens on the Land Trust properties. And I've most recently learned it happens along the railroad tracks, which I guess is not a surprise, but it happens there. So, that really needs to stop. And so one of the reasons I decided to get up and speak was to take, 2 minutes of TV 79 time to say to the town people in Darien, if you're dumping on property that doesn't belong to you, stop doing it. That's wrong. And that's it. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you.
And I'm very supportive of this trip.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, is there another member of the public that would like to speak?
I'm Dean Hatfield at 6 Nutmeg, and I know you've got an email that one of my neighbors presented when I was out of town. So I don't have much more to add to that, other than I'm still mostly concerned about the parking. Having that in my front yard is not ideal. I think we've already got quite a bit of traffic, and it's not a big enough site to be really a destination. I mean, it's only a third of a mile, so if you want the exercise, why wouldn't you park maybe at the church, or have the parking space that you're going to add inside the circle by the right field of the softball field? But I don't understand why you need it right in the neighborhood. I'd mentioned in my email, we've had a number of situations where the nutmegs kind of snakes. There's a turn. It's blind from my driveway, and a number of people take that too quickly. So I don't mind the speed bump idea, because I've actually thought of that. People speed right from Hollow Tree Ridge all the way down. There is a speed bump right before you enter the high school, but they zip down, and especially during the winter, that's where they miss that turn and they slide. I've had 2 cars go right into our basically front yard. So again, if you put parking spaces there and cars are trying to go in and out of those, I can see the same thing happening. And since most of, it seemed the primary reason you were putting the parking spaces in was because of the school being in session and there's no parking. Well, that means it's going to be during the winter. Also, I don't see people going to this track to use it as a park when it's during the winter, when it's all wet and marshy. I mean, last thing you want to do is go walk around in a swamp area. I know that one of the other neighbors mentioned the planked, the kind of the military path that they were putting in by the one ravine is only 2 feet wide, so it's not going to be ADA compliant. So
adjust that.
they've adjusted it, they make it wider?
Well, they could.
Okay, so,
Doesn't need to be.
doesn't, yeah, so anyways, the way it's presented, it's not ADA compliant, but again, I don't think since most of the school year, which is the concern on the parking, and my main argument is against the parking, it's going to be, you know, a swamp area. I don't think somebody with a wheelchair is going to want to go to the swamp, so. During the summer hours or summer days, you got tons of parking. So have really, my main argument, I think, maybe some of the, you know, I'm still concerned about the water flow because we have had increases in the water in our area. I know for a fact that our area is funneling in the appropriate area, so there's been no addition to the water other than the weather. So, so I don't know what other items I can add. I'll take your 2-to-1 offer, though. If you do 1/3 of an acre of taking away on the trail for the wetlands, then you can add 2/3 of no wetlands to our yard. So I'll take that offer if you want, as I heard a little bit earlier. So that's about it. Thank you.
Is there another member of the commission, another member of the public? Yes. Sure.
Good evening, Don Genio, 8 Nutmeg Lane. I think you've heard all my comments in the past. We just want to reiterate what my neighbor Dean had said. I have to commend you for watching out for the environment and protecting all of the species. In your 2 or 3 previous examples or projects to this, I did notice that you were very adamant about not having a resident take away from wetlands and conservation areas to add some to their property. It would be advisable if this was viewed along the same way. We are taking area away from species and other things for a track for the school where we're only gaining about not even a quarter of a mile. I didn't bring any photos today, but we were out there for the Planning Commission where we'll take this, looking at the amount of traffic and the amount of buses, and we are again concerned about the parking. I'll just reiterate our concerns of school activities going on, non-school property and affecting the neighbors. And you had mentioned if you're living near a school, you should expect this, but when we moved there, the school was far, far away and very small, and I would think they have enough area to do all of this without encroaching upon wetlands and conservation type area. The decision lies with you. We'd appreciate a positive decision, but I appreciate everything you're doing for the wildlife in the area and the conservation, and we all think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there another person from the public that would like to speak? No? Okay, the commissioners have anything else to have in public hearing? No? Can I have a motion to close the public hearing? Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Kelly, trying to fool me. Okay, the public hearing is closed on that.
Do we need to vote?
No, we're going to, I think we're going to
No,
discuss
but
it.
do we need to vote to close the public hearing?
We just did.
We just the whole thing?
That's what you just proposed the motion for. Oh, yeah, all in favor?
Oh, I did.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, I got you. Right, all right. All right. Okay, thank you for keeping me honest here. Okay. Moving on, the next public hearing is EPC 9, 2019. Sandra Lovegrove, parcel B-2, Valley Forge Road, proposing construction of a new residence and related site construction in the upland review area and a sewer force main in a wetland and water course. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 2 as lot number 29A. This was opened on April 3 and immediately continued.
Good evening, Doug DeVessa, professional engineer representing the applicant. This project before you tonight is located on the east side of Valley Forge Road, just near the cul-de-sac. It's located in the R2 zone. It's approximately 87,120 square feet. It was a vacant lot. Our clients owned it since in the 70s. It was subdivided back then to the house. Their existing house was to the north of this property. The property is bordered by residential properties to the north, to the east, land trust property on the east and the south side. There was land, the property was checked for wetlands through JMM Wetlands Consulting Services on September 7th, 2017. Jim is here tonight. He'll be able to talk a little more about the wetlands and so forth. The property is on the west side of the property. It's basically a lawn area. It's been maintained as a lawn area. Portion of the property on the east side of the property, the pond, was also maintained as a lawn. The rest of the property is wooded. Mostly the wooded areas on the east side of the pond itself, and the water drain, the drainage ditch from the pond itself. Jim will go a little more details on the wetlands itself. We calculated approximately 27,000 square feet of wetlands areas, which includes the pond, little wetlands associated with the pond itself, and along the water course, and the darker green shown on my plan here is the wetlands, as well as the Stony Brook that bisects the southeast corner of the property. There's about 1,500 square feet on the west side, which is associated with the water course, about 15,000 on the east side, and about 10,000 of water from the pond and the pond itself. So what we're proposing to do is do a single-family residence on the west side of the property with the driveway accessing it and drainage on the west side, crossing the water course at the narrowest point of the wetlands, and to a septic area up in the north and east corner of the property. We dug test holes up there. We found suitable soils for a septic. The plan is in review now with the health department. We haven't got a final approval from the health department, but we're in review with them for the approval of the septic system. To get the sewage, the effluent from the house, from the septic tank to the pump chamber, will be pumped underneath the brook through a crossing, through Lucas, the wetlands, upland areas, and discharge at the D-box at the septic system on the north and east corner of the property. The crossing of the brook has been done before. Its precedents, I believe this commission has approved a site, I think it was 91 half-mile road just a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. They approved something similar to this, crossing the brook. That would be done through the low flow season, flow time of the year, probably August, July. We have no rain. The pond does, at that point, the pond stays full, but doesn't go over the spillway, so the water course is probably pretty much dry at that point. We'll still put in some sandbags above and below the construction area, and put a pump in there to dewater it to an upland area, to dewater that if any water does occur in the trench when we're digging this. Build the force main on the upland side of the property, have it all ready, dig the trench, put it in there, and then backfill it and be done. Probably a half day's worth of work there, and then continue on with your trenching up for the force main up to the distribution box for the septic system, and then tie it back into the pump chamber. When we're constructing bringing in the select fill as required to meet the current health codes, we would provide, place two 15-inch corrugated plastic pipes in the trench, in the water course itself, put steel plates over it, and then we can bring a machinery across the water course and up into the septic area. We're looking at using a dump the material, sled fill, on the west side of the property, then bucket it across and up into the septic area. Not bringing any large trucks up into that area to bring the fill material in. I felt that's probably the best way without constructing any kind of real major roadway to get in there. We also talked about using wood chips pathway to get up in there, so that'll help, keep the compacting the soils and stuff like that. And then when we're done, clean the area up, provide a planting plan that will plant up the wetlands area that's been disturbed, and then probably just seed that and allow the area to go back to a natural vegetation in that area. In terms of kind of maintenance in the future for the septic area like that, pretty much let that go back to a natural state. Don't put any kind of trees and stuff like that over the septic area. You want to keep it open to the atmosphere so we get the evaporation as well as infiltration into the soils there. So again, leave that area more of a natural area, which it is right now. In terms of stormwater, we looked at the 10, 25, 50-year design storm. We were able to detain and maintain the peak flow, so have a zero increase in runoff on the property. Again, the property was a vacant lot, so that's how we took this property, and that's what's required by planning and zoning, looking at it as a fresh meadow or looking at it as a vacant lot, and it is a vacant lot currently, and that's what we looked at. The western part of the site was a lawn area, the eastern portion was a wooded area, and that's how we did our calculations, and I believe Joe has reviewed those things, and he can talk a little more about that. And when he gets up, we did show a reduction in runoff for the 10, 25, and 50-year design storm. The site is served by municipal water, so there's no wells required on this property. There's a water system in Valley Forge. We're tying into the proposed house. In terms of erosion controls, silt fence, double silt fence by the pond and along the brook itself, and then with silt fence on either side of the construction pathway up towards the septic area, just to keep that area disturbance to a minimum. We will show some stake hay bales along the fill material between the pond and the edge of the septic system to keep it from anything going down into the pond itself. That's really the overall view of the project. The wetlands setback areas, the regulated area is shown here in red, and pretty much a good portion of the house is in it. Majority of the eastern side of the property is in the upland review area, so that's the area that's mostly concerned about that, and also with the upland review area for Stony Brook. At this time, I'd like to ask Jim to step up and give a little talk about the wetlands he found down the site.
Just a question.
Sure.
Basement?
Yes, we'll have a basement. We're looking at probably a 7-foot basement, so we're looking at a minimal amount of basement in this house.
A 7-foot basement is a minimal amount of basement?
Yeah, I mean, typically you're getting around 9.
Okay. And so, clearly, given the proximity to the wetlands, you've done the test holes and things like this, so you can have how many sump pumps?
We'll have, either going to look at sump pumps or try doing gravity. We've been discussing this with my client as to what we're looking at doing, either gravity or doing a sump pump in the house itself.
All right.
And then we're looking at the elevation of the pond relative to the foundation and raising the house up a little higher so we get a minimum amount of water. We're looking maybe at 3.5 feet of basement sitting in the water.
That's a lot of water to pump.
Well,
That's a lot of water to pump, and you're changing the water levels of that. If you were to sink what I call the bathtub in there, I could go for that, but you're going to be pumping there continuously forever. Okay, so because some pumps are going to have to clear out the water for 3.5 feet. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean,
I mean,
You
we'll look
can
at.
continue the
we'll-
presentation, but
Right,
I'm
right.
stuck on that right now.
Right, well, we'll look at that, we'll look into that some more. I mean, we've had discussions about this whole thing, about the foundation and footings and stuff like that, and the groundwater, but we'll still, I don't think this hearing's gonna be closed tonight, so we'll still have time to review this and
Okay.
discuss it a little further and see if we can come up with a solution that would be acceptable to you and to my client and stuff like that as well.
Doug, have you looked at, instead of going around the south end of the pond to get to the septic field, going across the northern part of the property and then just around the top of the pond?
We've had discussions on that as well. I think you saw that letter from Dave Knopf, from the Director of Public.
I actually didn't see it,
Health.
sorry, but.
But he had talked about that. Talked with my client, they're building the house up north here.
Right.
And that's gonna be going on the market very soon. And then to put in a easement across that would encumber the property with an easement, which we're trying to avoid, and putting even a temporary construction up there. If the house is for sale and it does sell quickly, we're not gonna be able to get a pathway going in there. So we felt this was the best method, and going through the narrowest point of the property. And it's a disturbance, it's a minimal disturbance, and it's temporary, and it can be done. Crossing the brook itself can be done within half a day at the most.
I hope it sells quickly, but I just wonder if that might be better to go take a much shorter route.
We'll look into it, but we've had this discussion as well.
Okay. Sir?
Good evening. For the record, James McManus, Certified Professional Soil Scientist with JMM Wetland Consulting Services, with offices in Newtown, Connecticut. As Doug mentioned, I was first on the site back in September of 2017 to delineate the wetlands for both lots, actually. I didn't just do the wetlands for the lot that's for sale now, but I did the whole property. I did go back to the site late March of this year just to update my photos and grab some more baseline data for the report that I'm working on right now. The wetlands themselves consist of a man-made pond, which overflows through a stone dam or spillway and travels through a man-enhanced ditched water course, which Doug mentioned has lawn up to the edge along its western boundary, and that includes the pond itself. The east side, the wetland boundary continues along the abrupt line along the pond, and then eventually it will break away from the water course to include a more disturbed wooded swamp in this area, and then less disturbed as we get closer to Stony Brook, which is in that southeast corner. And this is all wooded at this point. The wetland boundary essentially followed along the top of the bank, except for one area where it bowed off just a little bit. And again, around the pond, the boundary was abrupt. The plants were mainly grasses, but in the woods we had red maple and we had rose bush and soft rush and royal fern, and some Japanese stilt grass was present in areas, as well as Asiatic bittersweet and poison ivy. That's just to name a few. The soils are fairly disturbed, at least in the western part, and the soils that are not disturbed were a wood bridge, which is mildly well drained with a hard pan or a compact till, and the wetlands were a complex of Ridgebury, Leicester, and Whitman. That's typically how we map those wetland soils. I am still working on the function and value impact assessment report. So I'm here to answer questions, but I'm still working on that. And I'll be back next time with a full report and with a little bit more in-depth presentation on the proposed conditions and the impacts analysis and the functional value assessment of the wetlands.
We await your report.
Thank you.
Doug?
At the last meeting, I think, Susan, you asked for the trees, look at the trees, and we do have, the plan up here has been updated. We have not given you an updated plan. We're waiting for Joe Canis's comments to come in to be able to submit one plan with all revisions on it. But this plan showing up here does show the trees that were field located. We've adjusted the force main to avoid any of the trees. I did take an inventory of the trees, of what's going to be removed. I'm sorry, I didn't have that out here for you. We're looking to remove about 12 trees. Of that, we're going to lose three trees that are 8 inches in diameter, one at 6 inch, one at 10 inch, 4 at 12 inches, and one at 15 and 2 at 16 inches. So some of the smaller trees are going to be removed, mostly in the septic area because of the amount of fill being brought in there. But putting the force main in there will avoid those trees because, again, that can be flexible, and it's a force main so we can move things around. And on the west side, we're going to be removing about 4 trees, which is in the location of the driveway mostly, because only a few trees up near the front of the road there. So again, I just want to let you know that we did do that, update that map for that reason. But we will provide updated maps and plans to the commission once we get comments, address Joe's comments and any other comments that the commission may have for the next meeting. That concludes our presentation. So if any more questions from the commission, we'll be glad to ask them.
What kind of equipment are you going to bring back to take the trees out?
We'll bring in, probably got to cut them by hand and then drag them out with a skid steer.
So you chip them on
the west side.
On the west side.
Correct.
So the chipper and all that sort of stuff would be.
The chipper we can bring across, and then we let the chips on for making the pathway in there, and then bring the machine back out the same way. Again, we try to do this during the dry time of the season. Again, that would be Monterey we've had the last month or so would be a good idea to get back in there, create more of a problem. But the drier time of the year would be the best time to do that.
Yeah, so. Are you done?
That's it. Yeah.
Can we, Joe?
Good evening. For the record, Joseph Canis, a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, principal engineer with the firm of Ty and Bond. We were retained by the commission to review the application. I issued a letter on April 29th after reviewing the plans and having a site walk on April 26th. And most of the comments are fairly minor in nature, things that the applicant's engineer can handle fairly easily. I just wanted to highlight some of the comments. I'm on page 2 of my letter. Comment number 6, I had some concerns with the elevation of the groundwater with respect to the proposed stormwater management system there. Just for Doug to confirm the groundwater depth and that there's enough separation. There's also 2 drainage inlets above this underground chamber system. Those inlets are directly on top of the system. So my concern is, if leaves fall in there, they get into those underground chambers. So it's going to be more difficult to maintain. So I just asked Doug to take a closer look at that. And also to take a look at the infiltration rate. The Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual requires a factor of safety be applied to the infiltration rate. So just to make sure that's incorporated into the design. Another comment I had was about the pond edge. The town is required under its stormwater general permit that they have from the state to encourage reduction of turf. So from Doug's testimony tonight, it sounds like they are letting a lot of this area to go natural. So that certainly meets that intent. And it also has some other ecological benefits, which I'm sure their soil scientist, wetlands professional can speak more to. So it sounds like they've taken steps to address that comment. Another concern I had, we do have this water course here. This wall comes up to a point which will act as a pinch point. I have some concerns about the stream undermining that during high flow events. So I asked Doug to take a second look at that. And then finally, with the proposed subsurface sewage disposal system up in here. I have some concerns. Just more of a question as to what the impacts of any potential nitrogen loading will be, because we are very close to the edge of the pond. They do conform to the setbacks, though. I will say that.
Yeah, they have to be set back, what, 75 feet?
It's actually 50 feet.
50.
Unless the lot was approved before 1982, in which case it's 25 feet. So they do conform to that setback.
You know, well, if it turns, if the pond gets extra nitrogen, I mean, that pond's gonna, how deep is that pond?
It's not very deep. No, so it's a fairly small water body, so the water quality isn't that great either. It's just asked Doug to provide a little bit more comment on that, that's all.
Okay, I guess the question is, when there is no rainflow, in the drought periods we had, like 2 years ago, was the pond dry?
That I don't know, you might be able to, no.
No? Okay.
So that's
Thank
all
you.
I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
Sump pumps.
Yes.
I'm sorry, hung up on it. Where are they gonna go here? Where are the sump pumps gonna, because sump pumps have to feed out somewhere. Where would they go? And how do I know that, you know, in a large rain event, that, Doug, maybe you can answer the question. Where are the sump pumps gonna feed off to? Because you can't put them directly into the river, so they have to infiltrate somewhere. Are there?
As we discussed earlier, we'll have an answer for you for that,
Okay.
for sure, at the next meeting there.
Fair.
Okay. I guess what I'll do is, we got Joe's comments on Monday. We reviewed them. I've gone through a quick review of them, prepared some notes for them, but we'll have a more depth comments for Joe and addressing his comments there. And I'll probably give Joe a call and discuss it as well. So
Yeah,
we
there
can
don't
be
look like
everything
any
on the same page
showstoppers
there,
there.
correct. You know, just some of the comments here. You know, the Stormwater Quality Manual wants to be 3 feet above groundwater. And that's an ideal situation. And it says it should be 3 feet above that. It doesn't say it shall be, it says should be. So we did the best we can based on the soil conditions we've got out there. We have a monitoring well in that corner there, so we are monitoring that water there. The groundwater at that level, a modeling level, which is a seasonal high groundwater indicator, doesn't mean the groundwater gets that high. Right now, we got an average of 22 inches, so we got a little bit more depth than we did prior to that. So, and then I looked at the numbers. If we had to bring this up, if we had to make this requirement 3 feet, we wouldn't be able to get any of our drainage gravity fed there. So, so again, we're trying to do the best we can, but I'll go in more detail with Joe. I'll discuss that with Joe further. With Joe had a comment about the 2 inlets on the above the detention system. They are 6 inch in diameter. They'll have grates on them. So again, leaves will not get in there. Maybe small debris will get in there, but not leaves and stuff like that. And obviously, that's going to be maintained during regular lawn services out there. And then we're going to looking at doing a buffer along the pond itself and on the west side as well as the east side. That will help address that.
Are you going to present the planting plan
Yes, we will.
next time?
Yes.
So Rich will be able to?
Yep,
Okay.
correct.
Part of my report.
Right.
Thank you.
And then Joe is correct about the regulations. It is 50 foot. The regulations for septic systems and a water course is 50 feet. But because the lot was created, there's a special exception in the regulations under that table for health code. Says if a lot was created prior to 1982, that's when the current health codes came into effect in 1982. That we go down to 25 feet minimum to a water course, and we've actually from the edge of the water to the edge of the system, we've actually got 29 feet. So we've got a little more than that versus exactly 25 feet. And with regards to the nitrogen comments that Joe brought up, we have a design manual that brings up nitrogen levels and stuff like that. It's not really required relative to our septic designs and stuff like that, but you got to look at, we have a septic tank and leaching fields. A septic tank takes out 25% of the nitrogen removals as well as leaching fields. So right there, we're taking what the DEP requirements and cut that in half right there. Also, you have to look at the flow path from the septic system and which way it's going. Groundwater follows the contours of the land, and so the contours of the lands are flowing in a north to a south direction, more easterly. So it's not going towards the pond itself. So again, you may get some little capillary coming at the very end here, but majority of it's going to flow in a southerly direction. So really getting nitrogen into the pond would be, you might get a little bit, but not that much into that area. Also, nitrogen is more effective, not so much in a freshwater body versus a saltwater body. So again, phosphorus is what we're more concerned about in a freshwater body versus in a freshwater. Phosphorus is more concerning in a freshwater body versus nitrogen. So again, nitrogen would be more of an issue in salt water. So those are just the quick overview of some of the questions that Joe has asked, but we've got a few more in here, but we'll go through each of those things. Joe and I will discuss it before the next meeting and make sure we have all those things addressed by the next meeting for him.
Can I ask Joe, can you comment more on just the practicality of constructing that wall that close to the stream?
Yeah, yeah, my concern is, first we get to excavate for the base wall. I don't need, and again, for the record, Joe Canis. And the other thing too is that, I assume, is this going to be a concrete wall, Doug, or is it going to be a segmental? Okay, yeah, so that's another question that I would have, and that's going to, determine, what the real impact of that stream is. For example, it's like in one of those Versalock walls, there's not much of a base on those. By Versalock, I mean those little small blocks. So that could get eroded fairly quickly.
I was thinking more
the other thing that I could do
during construction to just practicality.
Right, just being able to excavate there right next to the river will prove to be a challenge. So, does that answer your question, Rich?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask Doug just,
Sure.
Have you discussed the alternative of not having that driveway come in from the side?
Yes, we've discussed that, and also we're looking at, we've got a Velcro door here on the north side of the house here. We're looking at taking that Velcro door and putting it towards the east. This way we can move the house further to the north as well. So that'll give us a little more space down there. So that's one option that we're looking at right now. But we haven't finalized that either in terms of discussing, but that's one discussion we've had to move everything, house move it north. That'll give us more space between that retaining wall and that. And the retaining wall, we're only looking at, it's like a little over it's about 2.5 feet, 2.75 feet high. So it's not really a tall wall, but we certainly can, potentially look at that. Moving it further north, then we can probably do a poured concrete wall or something like that, correct? Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to answer Rich's and Joe's question on that, so. Okay.
Thank you. Susan, you had a?
Just to reiterate the points that Mr. Caddis made about the proximity of the driveway to the water course. I'm also concerned because water courses shift over time, and we had a case not long ago where there was a safety issue because the water course was shifting and was starting to erode someone's front porch. So something had to be done about that. And I just don't want to see another application a few years down the road because the water course has shifted and something's eroding on the building. So I feel very uncomfortable with it being that close to the water course.
Okay, well, we'll get. Are there members of the public that would like to speak? Please.
Good evening, everybody. Flip Hufford from the Darien Land Trust. As you've heard earlier, the Land Trust is a abutting neighbor in two directions. We have a 2-acre property to the south, immediately to the south of this property, and a 2-acre property immediately to the west across the road. And
okay, so can you point that out, please?
Sure. So our property would be down here, below this property. This little creek flows down into our property. Yep. And then our property is over here to the west. And our concerns with this development proposal really focus on protecting our properties, which we view as beautiful wetlands-focused properties, and making sure that they're not impaired by both the construction process and then by the ultimate buildings that are built. But also making sure that we collectively do as much as we can to preserve these beautiful wetlands on this property. And for anyone who hasn't gone up and walked the property, it's really a beautiful lowland combination of water features and wet soils. The ferns are all coming up now. It's beautiful up there, so we want to make sure that it doesn't get trashed in this process. We have a number of concerns about this proposal, and I'll just try to go through them quickly. Our first and probably biggest concern is this retaining wall that's proposed right down here. That is right in the middle of the kind of creek environment as it's drawn here. And frankly, it didn't actually occur to us to be worried about it being undermined. What we were concerned about is kind of the opposite of that hardening that bank in peak flow periods of time would cause erosion on the other side of the stream. And you'll hear from me in a moment that one of the things that we are tremendously concerned about is silt coming down this creek in flood periods. And then our property down here has a pond on it. And that's one of the key sort of natural features of that property. And that pond always struggles with silt just naturally. And then to have construction silt coming down would be a big shame. So we would like to suggest doing something other than putting that retaining wall there. From our perspective, obviously this is from the outside, it looks like the only reason that retaining wall is required is because they've made the discretionary choice to put the garage doors down here on the southern face of the house as opposed to on the western face of the house. If you were on the west, you wouldn't need that extensive paved area here, nor would you need the retaining wall. So the simple choice of which face of the house you put the garage doors on drives a lot of environmental impact from our perspective. So the next point for us is siltation, as I mentioned. Given the amount of open soil that will be on this site during the construction process, and then the trenching and construction vehicles going over here onto this side, and the digging of that septic field, we are very concerned about silt coming down into the pond and then into ultimately the creek and then coming into our pond. And we would ask that as you review this project that you put the tightest standards on silt fencing that you can to prevent that. We've all seen sort of the standard mesh silt fences with even hay bales on them in periods of big rainfalls like we had last fall get overwhelmed. And it's unfortunate in many projects, but in this one it would really be devastating to have an insufficient barrier to the construction silt coming into the waterways. The next request that's been sort of touched on in the various comments tonight is a request that we better be able to understand where they're proposing to have lawn and where they're proposing to have more natural vegetation. And obviously what we're focused on is the sort of border areas along the waterways. And in addition to just wanting to know, where that is and encouraging the commission to require that there be borders to prevent runoff into the water, to prevent fertilizer overspray from applications into the water, we would ask that whatever you ultimately end up approving have some sort of long-term teeth to it, so it's not the sort of thing that they stick a couple plants in the edge, get the CO, and then either the new owner of the house decides they don't like that and they start mowing it right down to the water, something that has lasting effect.
Flip, I believe, Rich, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's 3 years, right?
Well, when you've done wetland restoration projects, you've had a 3-year monitoring period for invasives in particular coming in, and also to make a 3-year monitoring period, not necessarily just to see that it's been kept natural. Going long-term, future owners and so on, it just becomes an enforcement issue.
We would be happy to monitor it on an ongoing basis.
And that's what it takes, that somebody calls and says.
These are,
the
you know,
new owners-
from the land trust point of view, these are important things. And if it's important to the commission in making the determination to approve or disapprove of the project initially, that logic should apply for a long term, not for 6 months, not till the next owner buys the
Well,
house.
it's a lot longer than 6 months, or.
Well, I'm just
It's just,
picking up,
5, 10 years from now.
Well, no,
if somebody-
Rich, he raises an interesting point.
Somebody-
Can we make it part of the land trust, a land deed? That says that, hey, this has to be kept natural, et
Well,
cetera?
we do put a notice on the land records to new owners, and whether they.
Whether they pay attention to it is something
Whether
else.
they obey, or whether they maintain it or not, it's on the land records that they're noticed that it has to be. Again,
But which would help your case as,
if.
yeah, we're happy to.
If you see it.
We live right south,
That's
so we
exactly
can,
right. So
we
when you're
can
looking
look at
at
it.
your property, and
Yep.
you look at that property 10 years from now, and there's a new owner, and they're mowing down to the pond,
Yeah.
then, you know, you would notify the town.
Okay. So the next point is actually the point you've hit on a couple of times, which is, given what seems to us to be a very high water table in this area, literally there's water on the surface of many of the places. We didn't quite understand how you have a basement and a sump pump, and you're like pumping a never-ending supply of water out, and then you gotta put it somewhere where it's back on the top. So that whole
it
area.
flows down onto your property?
Yes.
Because that's exactly what the sump pump's gonna do, because otherwise, it's just recycling the same water, yeah.
Right, so,
We have a
didn't
couple
really
of-
have
we-
any
we have a couple of those
details.
around,
We didn't
yeah.
really have any details of it, as Doug has said, but that to us seemed like a big question mark.
Yep.
In terms of the septic field, we're obviously not the experts in what the different government requirements are for that, but it's seemed to us that nutrient contamination of this pond, whether it's nitrogen, whether it's phosphorus. Yes, phosphorus is the limiting nutrient in freshwater environments, but this is basically the top of Stony Brook, and that goes right down into Gorham's Pond and then into the Darien coastal waters. So that nitrogen doesn't necessarily go away when you dump it into the water. The element that is kind of also confusing to us in the design of that is that septic field by elevation is going to be, it seems to us, looking at it, at or above the pond. So it is separated by lateral distance, but just making sure that that septic system doesn't end up dumping nutrients into either that pond or, if it's going the other way, into Stony Brook. It would be important. So I think those.
Hey, Flip, I think Mr. DeVesta already said that the natural flow is south and east, as opposed to, it's 29 feet from the pond. Okay, and the natural flow of the septic field would be south and east, so away from the pond, right? You said there might be some capillary flow there too, towards the pond, but the by and large.
He may be right. To my eye, it doesn't look like that. And then you've got the relative elevations right there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't obviously have
Yeah.
any scientific analysis of
Well,
where
we'll
it
ask
flows.
Mr. Connors to take a look at that elevations then.
South and east, Mr. Chairman, is the Stony Brook as well.
Yes. Yeah, but that's a lot more distance there.
I
Okay,
understand
okay,
that.
because
I understand.
all of a sudden, if you say, hey, if it's 29 feet from there,
Right.
or, excuse me, 29 feet, right?
Yeah.
To the pond, all of a sudden to get to the other tributary would be several, 100 or
Yeah,
or more.
it's more distance.
So
It's more distance. to Stony Brook.
Which is considered natural cleaning at that point in time.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
So I think those were our concerns.
Super.
And,
All right, thank you
just
for
wanted to
bringing
let
that.
you guys know. Thank you for.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, is there another member of the public that would like to speak?
It's probably 140 feet.
Yes, sir. Please come to the podium.
Hi, I'm Caleb Clark. I'm at 15 Half Mile Road, so we're right here. That's us. So we abut, we abut the land trust, and then I think we've just hit a corner of the property here. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add. I'm sort of getting up to speed in this right now, but I don't have a ton to add in terms of what the land trust has pointed out. I mean, if I were to point to my biggest concerns, it would be around the water table, just knowing how wet the land is. I have concerns that you're gonna be pushing water, down and into the land trust land, which candidly pushes water into I guess it's the southwest corner of our land, which is already very wet to begin with. And, in a season like this, we're already seeing, our lawns basically have water at this point. So really, I want to make sure that the water study would incorporate that. And I'd also, again, emphasize the points around sort of what happens in the septic area in terms of the nutrients that are coming down, just knowing how much water goes through that area. I mean, the one thing I'll say about the land trust land, which, we love and appreciate and look out onto at certain times of the year, I mean, that is one, very flooded, and then two, a lot of debris can build up on the dam there, and then the water shoots back up. So I'd want to just understand how all the water tables impacting not only the land trust land, but then would look to run up onto our land from that perspective.
And your question will be answered next.
That's what it sounded like.
Next time by Mr. DeVesta, who's required, this is literally a green field today.
Right.
And so the regulations state that he's not allowed to add or subtract water from the flow today.
Okay.
Okay, and so he has to, quote unquote, bury the water somewhere. He can't, and that's the genesis of my question of sump pump and going, where are you gonna put the sump pump water? Because typically people who use sump pumps, pump it into a local stream or something like that, which adds to the volume of the stream, which would exacerbate any problem on the south. And so, Mr. DeVesta is gonna come up with some proposals for June 5th. So thank you for your concerns, because I think we got it.
Yeah, and then I guess the only other question is, you guys understand the regulations, but, I don't know where we were in 2017, but that seemed like a particularly dry period to me versus the last 2 years that we've had. And the other concern I would have is, again, if I remember last August or July, in terms of blocking off the stream during a quote-unquote dry period, I mean, I'm not totally confident that you can do that you're going to get to a period where that area of the stream's really dry. So I'd want them to be able to address that, even if, it weren't at this, I just don't see it going down to zero, having walked around that property.
Yeah, 17 was dry, 18 was wet, okay?
Right.
18 was wet, and so far this year we've been wet in terms of average rainfall, according, at least what I read in the Stamford Advocate. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's an absolute concern that he's going to have to deal with. Next time we'll hold our ammunition until.
Okay. All right. So I just but appreciate the time.
Sure. Thank you. I see somebody standing up in the back. Are you interested to?
Standing because my back's.
I can appreciate that.
And I can see you now.
Okay. That's all. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak?
Okay. I just have one housekeeping thing.
Sure.
From Doug, if you could just, I need an extension of the hearing period. So if you could just email and great.
35 more days or 60?
Well, at least 35 to get us to June, yeah. That was all I needed to make sure.
That's what I needed. Okay, we'll see you gentlemen on the
June 5th.
June 5th.
No, you don't need a motion.
No, there's no more. It's just, we keep it going. Okay, let me see. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we've got now agent approvals. No action is necessary unless the commission receives an appeal of the approval within 15 days of the publication date per section 12.2 of the IWWC regulations. EPC 17, 2019, Nicholas and Antonia Rumble, 3 Overbrook Lane, proposing a fence in an upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 15 as lot number 39. The commissioners have that. Is there any comments or questions for Rich? No, I'm all set too. So, okay. EPC 20, 2019, Nathan and Ann Riggs, 3 Scout Trail, proposing a patio in an upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's Map number 20 as lot number 19. Anybody have anything for that? No? Susan, are you okay?
Yep.
Good. Okay, we finished that. Now we move to the minutes. We're moving to the minutes of April 3, 2019.
I just have to find them, I circled them. I wasn't there, so I'm included in the last page.
Oh,
as
okay.
making a
In spirit,
motion.
in spirit.
I did not.
You did not.
I normally do second Susan's motions, but I wasn't there, so
Force
I'm
it
not
out,
sure
sorry.
who seconded it, but it wasn't me. And
I'll go
there's,
back and review it. That's-
on the last page, page
Yeah,
5.
yeah, David Genovese
David
would like his name spelled correctly, second
Yeah.
paragraph.
Oh, okay.
Oh, by the way.
And I would like
have-
I have a gender transition here on the top of the page, to the last
Okay.
page.
If you could pass them all down.
Oh, Mr. McKenzie. Oh, look at that one.
I can,
First, you got that right? The first on page 5?
did I, oh, the.
Yes, we haven't changed.
I can fix it.
And I don't think the chairman, as impressive as he is, needs a capital the.
Oh.
Okay.
The other question, on the David Genovese, have they heard back?
I have that.
No, they.
Because you guys saw my letter, right, to go there, and
I had an
David, why
email.
don't you just recap
What,
what's
can we just
happened?
finish the minutes and then?
Okay, yeah, okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Not yet.
No? Oh.
Couple of simple typos, which I'll pass on to Rich, of course. In the middle of page 3, Don Genzio at 8 Nutmeg, and Dean Hatfield, I think you might want to put the number of his home in there, Rich,
6,
which
right?
I think was 6. I think he was here
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, he was.
And then the paragraph below that, Jen Montanaro, said the project designs by Joe Canis for the DAF and Board of Education have been meticulous through completion. That, to me, the order of that sentence isn't right. But unless it's just referring specific to designs, to me, it might read better by Joe Canis and DAF for the Board of Education, are meticulous and will be through completion.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I think she was talking about the previous
Yeah,
projects,
yeah.
but I can definitely change it.
Yeah. Oh, I think that was
Have
your-
been
I
in
think
the-
that was your
Yeah, I
point.
think, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's, yeah.
Her
I
point was
agree.
that.
That's what she's
Clear.
trying, okay.
Yeah, she was talking about the history.
Just the
his history
design
and-
efforts.
And the projects
As
he's been
opposed to
involved
the-
in before.
Yeah,
the
no, it's
full
a good
project
point.
once
You should probably
approved.
clarify
Yep.
that for the record.
And then the only other question I have, there's the typo and stuff. In the page 5, the third paragraph, he described how the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had arrived at a possible fee in lieu of $9,200. He said Connecticut does not have a specific formula for streams. He said this is really more of a question. He said the Environmental Protection Agency is considering applying New Hampshire's formula, which may mean a fee of $424,000 as opposed to would.
Okay.
But is it, and it is the Environmental Protection Agency or
Yes.
the Army
Yes.
Corps?
No, the Environmental Protection Agency has the authority to weigh in on Army Corps permits.
Okay, then that's right.
Yep.
And it was actually sort of,
So does the
it was
Fish and-
sort of cockeyed how they got there.
So
Yeah.
does the.
Okay, because it was like twice the New Hampshire, but, you know,
It
like,
was in an
so.
email. I think the number came from an email.
So does the
that-
Fish and
Yes.
Wildlife Service.
Okay,
other
so that
federal
agency as cited is correct.
Other federal agencies can weigh in on.
And I remember either David's comments the night he presented, or maybe in the draft of letters, the fee could vary from $200,000+
To
to
$9,200
$400, to 9 to 2 to 4.
If they applied it to both banks, it would be in the higher range. If they applied it to one bank, and there were a number of different ways
Right,
they were
okay.
trying to calculate it.
Thank you.
But anyway, let's get the minutes approved. Can I have a motion to approve these minutes as amended? Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you, Susan. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 3 and 1 abstention. Okay, now,
I haven't heard. I did have an email that they were going to be, have some kind of discussion with Corey Rose in
Today,
the
wasn't it?
near future. Yeah, or today, or, yeah.
Who's Corey Rose?
She is the project manager for the Army Corps of Engineers. She handles Connecticut for the most part.
She's the one that came up with, basically initiated all of this to.
Well, no, she actually originally wanted to handle this as a programmatic general permit, which would have meant just basically saying, you just go ahead and do it, just notify us, and, the lowest level. It was kicked up to an individual permit, and then the whole fee in lieu of was brought up by the EPA, not Corey. No.
Oh, okay. So we'll find out and let you guys know. There are two things that, first, do we want to discuss Diller?
I think you should, yeah.
I would think so. Okay, so I always start to my right, Gunnar.
My only concern is the parking. I just think trying to put 6 parking spots on that road there is a bad idea. I think they should relocate something over on the high school property somewhere, somehow allocate some parking for this project there. I'm definitely in favor of the project, but not the parking part of it. That's my only major concern, because I think it looks, from walking the property, it looks like nothing's been done there in years and years and years, and this would be would definitely be an improvement. So that's not my issues with the parking, and I really sympathize with those neighbors that have
I
gotten.
can't tie that to a wetland.
But isn't the parking within 50 feet of the?
Yes, but
Well,
the issue there
there's no-
is if they curb it, it runs, there is a sewer downstream towards the high school where the sand, salt, et cetera, would just flow right into the sewer and wouldn't affect the wetland per se. So that would be the argument against that. That says, hey, do we need 6 spaces there? I don't know. Could we cut it down to 3 or 4, and push them towards the sewer? Okay. Obviously there's lots of issues there of high school kids parking there. Well, I appreciate, as a neighbor, I can appreciate them saying that, but unfortunately that's not within the.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
The context of
Nothing from an
EPC.
engineer or a wetland scientist.
I mean, there's
saying
already
that
no
it's gonna
parking
impact.
signs there now, so I don't see how this is any different in terms of being.
Yeah, so, and it'd be a police issue anyway. That's sort of
Yes,
like,
a police issue.
like, as someone said there, well, what happens if we see somebody there at midnight? It's sort of like, well, what do you do now? Sort of question. So, anyway, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the changes, so I walked it after they flagged everything, and I think with the changes that they presented at the last meeting that it wasn't at, I think it's a great use of the property, so I'm definitely for it. I am definitely opposed to the parking. I know we don't have jurisdiction over it. I think it is a horrific idea to put parking in there. It will be filled with high schoolers. It already is narrow. If you've ever gone up there at any time of day, and it's not just the high school kids, if you've ever gone up there at 5 o'clock on a weekday, the entire town of Darien is playing lacrosse in the spring, or they're playing football, little kids. So there's already tons of people parking up there, and there's plenty of parking spaces. I think it's a bad idea to put parking on that road. I don't think it's safe. And the high school kids are all going to park there. They don't care if they get a ticket. They can afford to pay the ticket. They're happy just to have a place to park where they can walk to school.
Yep.
I assure you, their parents will write the check for the ticket just so they don't have to drive their kids to school. So it's nice to give the Darien High School kids 6 more parking spaces.
They'll really
Juniors.
appreciate it.
Juniors.
Yeah.
Juniors.
It's all the juniors.
It'll be the juniors, because the seniors.
We're counting the weeks,
Yeah,
2
the
more
forum
weeks
would
till
be
they
the-
can park in
It
school.
actually would be the Parks and Rec Commission, because it's their project. That would be the forum to, you know,
Yeah,
for
I
the
mean,
public to
I'm
go to
sure
them and
it
say,
will
hey,
get
why
raised.
don't you?
I'm
yeah.
sure it will get raised. I just think it's a bad idea, but I think the use of the property for this purpose, I think is great.
I agree. I think it's a low impact use of this property, and I think it will be a net improvement with the maintenance, cleaning out neighbors' garbage, and so I think the project is good. I think that, I think the parking isn't really in their purview anymore, since there is no impact on the wetlands. But I think they have to put in parking. If this is going to be a public use, they have to address that somehow. But I think we said it's either park and recs or planning and zoning, but I don't think it's in our purview anymore.
Even if you park 6 cars there, and I don't know how much cars drip oil or stuff anymore that could find its way into the wetlands, isn't that a concern? Is that a reason that we, you know, as you said, they're gonna curb it, Eric, and it's sand and salt's gonna find its way into a storm drain, but what about oil from a older car or gas?
Because that would sort of get pushed off by water and stuff like that, and would go into the sewer drain, as it does today.
It's too speculative to try and quantify.
Yeah, no, I
and say that's-
realize.
Yeah.
I'm trying to grasp at it, but I like all of you guys. The parking to me should be a non-starter, but it doesn't sound like it's in our.
Yeah, I'm just not sure how I can
Do
deny
that.
it as EPC.
Yeah.
Wearing our EPC hat, you know, we could say, hey, I don't think it is, but as an EPC hat, we would have a difficulty to find an EPC reason to turn it down. No, the one thing I would like to point out is Susan Cameron's last comment, which is people who are abusing open land next to them, okay, to dump stuff, put lights on,
Encourage them to the property.
you know, absolutely, all of a sudden, you know, behind these properties, there's no underbrush. You know, there was nothing there when we were walking it, and it's sort of like, wow, isn't that amazing? That it doesn't, you know, there's just nothing, it's total woods, and then there's nothing, you know, and so there's a stack of logs, you know, stack of old stuff. So that'll be.
Propane tank.
I'll be watching that, okay? And so I'll be watching Parks and Rec to make sure that they exercise dominion over their property, okay? To make sure that, Rich, and you should, you know, communicate that to Pam.
Oh, she's aware.
She's aware? Great, okay.
Is this going to planning and zoning?
Planning and zoning?
Yes.
Yes.
For landfilling and regrading.
Because you have to get over the wall. Remember,
Right.
you have to get over the wall, so they're gonna have to do something there to, you know, so as a cross-country thing, it doesn't, you know, it's a slight incline and down, but they're looking at it as a filling and grading permit. Okay, not leaving the rest to EPC, because we've had public hearings here, and even they can't touch parking.
Yeah, it's a
So-
permitted use. Parks are a permitted use on parkland. It's not a special, it's not a.
Special permit.
No.
It's not a special permit, so, Rich and I talked to Jeremy about that. So, okay, well, I sort of get a sense of
We
the
can't even
commission.
say that the parking can't be paved because it would increase like water flow into the,
Sewer?
yeah, wow.
Into the sewer drain?
into the-
Oh, you want it, gravel would
Be
be,
worse.
would be a maintenance nightmare.
Nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, you already have a paved sidewalk, basically.
Yeah.
So, and the track is gonna be
Gravel.
It's gonna bump into that though, isn't that correct? Or maybe half the
Yeah.
width of a car?
Yeah, it's bumping in, and the parking, and then path next to it, next to the wall, yeah.
Yeah.
So the path will become the sidewalk for that section.
The running path.
Yeah, for that section.
Adjacent to the
Until it gets back to the existing sidewalk, then across the street and back onto gravel and so on.
Okay. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to? That's all. Okay, I'd like to open it up,
So it's going to drop something for next?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so that's
Yep.
it for that.
Yep. I'd like to add another piece of other business here. I got an email from Jamie Stevenson, so do I need a motion to?
Yeah.
Okay, so the concept is I need a motion because I got an email from Jamie Stevenson that I'd like to share with the commission, so thank you, Kelly, thank you, Susan. All in favor? Okay. Basically, I was gonna make a copy of this, but it's 3 sentences, so that's not a big deal. Good morning, Eric. I hope this note finds you well. Last night's spring rainstorm has prompted this email. I would like to request that the EPC as Darien's flood erosion and control board take the lead on a town-wide watercourse stewardship educational program in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen and subject matter committees of the RTM. I'm happy to meet with your staff, et cetera, to discuss. So, what this is, and I've had a lot of questions, and I'm sure you guys are just hanging around town. What can people do with watercourses? What can they do, and what they should not do? And so, what I want to do is to I know you had something, Susan, that you produced a pamphlet at some point in time that stated a lot of these things. And so what I want to do is to talk out with the commission here as to what sort of things, given her statements here, what sort of things do you think is appropriate that we should do and to inform the town? I mean, we could sit down with the Darien Times and Darienite to get something discussed there. We could have pamphlets. We can have pamphlets written out to sent to every member in town as to things you can and cannot do. For example, it was a great example on the Diller property where the guy Nutmeg said, "Well, there's a tree that's fallen across the river, and it's not on my property." Well, and Rich's response was call Mike Lynch of the Board of Ed, and that's his issue, and he should take it out, okay? And I know that there are, the town's a lot better about maintaining, storm drains that get filled up or get stuff like that, but I don't think there's, common knowledge as to what people know what they can and cannot do in wetlands, upland review areas, conservation easements, so that, because all these things are critical to the watercourse stewardship, which is what we're charged with, essentially. So, I'd like to open it up to some discussion here as to what you guys think would be, what should be the objective, and then next steps for us as a commission to talk about. And I would like to make this, next meeting, we keep this on our agenda here, so just to remind us that we have this responsibility here.
So do you guys, did the first selectman have any more specific ideas of what
No.
they wanted to achieve?
No. It was sent, by the way, this was sent to Jeremy Ridge and myself. And so,
But I'm wondering, other than the fact that the past 2 years have been incredibly wet and we've had extreme flooding, was there an event that prompted the request?
She personally has talked to me about the scout cabin and, taking pictures of flooded roads, things like that are, you go, yes, if it's going to, do 5 inches in a couple of hours, well, yeah, you're going to get flooded roads. Okay, that's that, like that. But stewardship stewardship in my mind comes down to how do we take care of the water courses that we have, the ponds and things like this. How do we make sure that they continue to be clear? Okay, for example, one of the things that we have over on Jim's side of town, we have the piece of property that we approved from an EPC perspective that goes from Brookside underneath the post road. Okay, that continues to be an issue and continues to back up. And the reason is the property owner is, I'm not sure what the status of, but PNC turned them down. Denied it. And so as a result, I don't know what the applicant is thinking of doing, appealing or not appealing, but that's would be a great example of a stream that comes down and goes through. We can go through almost every stream I can think of has there are certain neighbors that take good care of their streams and other ones that don't. There are ones that near me, for example, there was one that goes underneath the highway at I guess it's Old Kings Highway South, and it goes underneath the bridge. Well, I can remember, serious logs, would get stuck there, and it would back up tremendously until someone spoke to Ed Gentile's predecessor, and the guy came, boom, cleaned it out. We never had another problem, and it's just sort of on their, in their conscience that they have to go through and look at that sort of stuff. Downtown Darien, the railroad bridge, underneath the railroad bridge, that was. I mean, since I can remember, that was always flooded in streams, and they have good technical issues now. If it floods, it's much more of a rare event, but they also maintain it better. So, what I want to do is to come up with an educational program that we can give out, and I think we have to come up with, Rich, and maybe it starts off with have other towns done something similar to this that you can ask around. Okay, as to do they have a do's and don'ts? Pamphlet for hey, you live near a wetland, you live near a stream. This is what you can and cannot do. Okay, and so
I don't think it's going to be one pamphlet. I mean, I'll just say because we obviously deal with a lot of this stuff for Gorham's Pond.
Sure.
So one is you need to know who to call. So it should be very easy to put together a pamphlet that lists out some of the issues people might face and then who you call. Because that's the step number one, right? Nobody knows, like, there's a tree blocking the Goodwives River. Like, who do I call? Like, whose responsibility is it to remove it? Nobody ever knows. So, like, who do you call? So that's, like, the step number one. And then there's lots of issues that always come up. Leaves are a big one. Like, how many times do we hear about people dumping leaves, right? And that's one of the first things, I heard when we bought our house and in talking to, the Friends of Gorham's Pond and everybody else, they're like, you need to make sure that your leaves are not blowing into the pond. Like, I wouldn't have blown them into the pond anyway, but, super. They're like, yeah, but a lot of people do, so make sure that you speak to your gardeners and make sure if you're doing it that you're taking them away. So educating people about leaf
press
disposal.
releases before. We've sent individual letters to people who have blockages, and whether they respond or not on private property, we don't have the authority to go on their property. And Ed Gentile will tell you there's a couple he knows of that we've sent them letters saying it's your responsibility to fix the stone wall that's collapsed or whatever. But we do a press release. I mean, we could get it, try and make it more widespread, I guess, or try and get it to more people. I don't know how. I'm not sure how that's done, but we have done that before in terms of leaves and debris.
I definitely think also whatever we put together, get it to the kids at the high school who do the environmental groups there, because that's a really, probably the most effective way to disseminate information is to that kind of demographic who's super passionate about it and has social media connections and everything else to get things out, and then they'll do something at school, and they can even, you know, go and teach it at the elementary and the middle school.
And there's that
As part-
educational charity that works with kids in Darien, like in the schools. I forget what it's called.
That's a good.
I know.
But I think, you know, I mean, I definitely think you could get probably a couple high school kids who want to, you know, get their community service time, who would probably be super passionate about putting some of this stuff together, and it would be a great.
Would you know somebody there to?
I can ask. My daughter is not, you know, she does volunteer stuff for environmental stuff, but this is not her thing. But
Okay.
I actually can't think of one off the top of my head. But yeah,
And the Boy
I'll see if I can
Scouts.
ask.
The Land
Oh,
Trust
lots.
may have,
Yeah, the land trust.
the Land Trust, because they have 200+ acres under protection, adjacencies to
I'm
homes.
sure they've
Or
done, yeah,
part of people's private lands. They may have done some, I don't recall it when I served on that board, but they take a very, as you heard Flip say tonight, they're very conscientious about stewardship.
Yeah, I was impressed that he got up here too. That was the
Yeah.
first time that someone from Land Trust has gotten up to speak
Yeah.
to us. Huh?
I can certainly revisit that little pamphlet. It's still an easy thing to put out. It's very accessible.
If you could take a look at that to see what, you know, if there's something we can use to
So it sounds like Jamie's asking not only for some of the ideas that would go on a do's or don'ts list, but the medium as to how it might be distributed.
Yes.
Whether it's mailed to every household or whether it's a Facebook page or whatever.
Yeah, that's the means. What we have to do is get the objective down first, and then we can figure
Right.
out how
disseminate.
there's what our message is, and then we can figure out how to distribute it. And I just, you know, instead of starting with a blank sheet of paper, I like to, you know, what have other towns done?
Right.
Check out Land Trust. Susan has, you know,
It's
has the
basically
brochure.
done. The text is done. We just need to update the graphics.
And then, you know, things like this, you know, I'll contact Aquarian, because they have to have stuff around their reservoirs.
That's a good idea.
Okay, to, that
They do, although you might not like some of the stuff that they put out, which is like when trees fall in the water course, leave it there.
No, I understand that. I have
They have a very
a
different.
couple of contacts there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the trees in the watercourse, if it's causing a localized flooding problem, then you got to do something about it. But the question is if it's on private property. I mean, not too long ago, I had a neighbor who's, you know, a tree came down on another neighbor's property across a stream. They were concerned that it would, you know, block up water, and, you know, all I can do is contact that owner and say, could you please take care of it? And they did.
Yeah.
But if they didn't, don't really have any recourse.
We've encountered some who have said no.
Yep, so they went in, they cut out a section of the tree. But then, you know, if you want to take the whole tree out of the wetland, you don't really have to. You can just cut a section,
Right.
and what Aquarian says is just let it become part of the habitat.
Do we have any maps of our water courses that go through town?
Sure, Rich has the,
Well, the water courses on the wetland map are accurate. It's, you know, it's only the wetlands that you update because they need to be individually flagged on properties. But in terms of the water courses, the wetland map is
Just wonder if we could create something to show. I just think it's interesting. Like, this is Norton River. This is where it goes. Follow the path. You know, like the tube line in London. This is, you know, what it looks like. And so people understand that, you know, it doesn't loop up around like this way. I mean, they can see where, well, I'm just a map geek, but.
well, we have to.
No, I think that's right. I think
No,
that's
the
actually really
wetlands map exists, and you can see that as the things flow down, so.
Well, I could have our Nancy Sarner, who does our GIS, I think she could probably produce the wetland map without the wetland soils.
We're just
which would make
showing so
the
people can
water
see where the
courses-
water course is going right by their house, where it, you know, ends up.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know how to put together an educational program, but I could certainly produce a map.
Produce the map, and then, no, because, well, this is gonna take input from all of us to get this.
I did this for one of my classes, we had to pick a local water course and just follow it from the top, and I think Stony Brook's the one that starts in Waveney, is that right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, well, more or less.
Yeah,
it's,
so I started up in
yeah.
Waveney, following the source, and literally followed it all the way down, like in the car, just driving back and forth across culvert after culvert until you get down to Gordon's Pond. And, I mean, it was just sort of, it was interesting to see exactly where it goes and impacts along the way.
So, no, it also has, you know, it also has, gets very diffuse. You know, you heard.
It's another example, so people don't know that this little creek actually goes into Stony Brook or what have you.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
But I
they
think
don't,
we
you
just
mean they
know.
don't know that the little tributary
Right.
in their backyard is actually something that reaches Stony Brook? Yeah.
Exactly.
That's probably true in many cases, they don't really realize where the water goes. I can see that.
Well, they know it goes
Somewhere.
You know, but this is, I think, the first river Susan pointed out that went north rather than south. Okay, went around the high school, was from the Diller property. And so everything else just runs south as far as I know. So, but anyway, what I'd like to do is I'll be, you know, Rich and I will be working on this. I'll be contacting somebody in the RTM. We've got Jeremy helping us on this also, so.
I'd love to be involved if you're looking for extra bodies.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes, we'll get this, because I'll be contacting Seth Morton, who's the moderator for the RTM, find out who he thinks I should contact for you know, from PZNH or something like that to.
And what they think the needs are, like what issues really need to be addressed.
So anyway, but okay, thank you, Susan. I'll be contacting you.
And I'll get you some names from the high school.
From the high school for
I
communication.
mean, I think it would be a great summer project for some high schoolers to do.
Sure, that's a great idea.
Volunteer project.
Absolutely.
Things to do, looks good on their
You
resume.
know some high schoolers, huh?
Well, I know, I can only think of one that might want to do this, but I can ask.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there's somebody out there that would be interested.
I'm sure there's a number of them. I know that there's a number of environmental clubs, and they have obviously
sure.
the AP environmental science classes up there, so I would expect that there's probably some kids who are quite interested in this type of stuff, so.
Great. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Gunnar, that was a little quick on your point. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Channel 79, we're off the record.